This is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for the good programming. I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Howdy. It's Thursday, okay? Remember, we now have a 3-day weekend. Friday starts the weekend. So tomorrow, even though I will still be here talking on the radio and you might still be listening, we in our hearts, we are going to think, this is the weekend. This is the weekend. So I guess this is the final day of the week. You know, I told you yesterday that the Military Times was reporting that the USS Abraham Lincoln had been deployed for so long. They were supposed to go home in May, and their deployment was extended with no end in sight. And a Military Times reported that at least 3 sailors had apparently tried to commit suicide by jumping off the boat because of the struggle of being on that metal floating city for nearly a year. The announcement was made today that the USS George Washington is en route, and will be relieving the USS Abraham Lincoln. But Pete Hegseth, according to the Guardian, Pete Hegseth says no, the mental health problems aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. No, that's not true. Not true. Those reports of people having mental health crises and maybe trying to harm themselves, completely misrepresented. Completely misrepresented. By the way, this wasn't just reporting in the Military Times. At least one senator, Richard Blumenthal, he's a member of the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee. He sent a letter to Hegseth. And Hung Kao, the acting Navy secretary, demanding a formal accounting of conditions on the carrier. You know, this wasn't just they're sick of being there. We've been told that... Jesus. Sorry. There was just a lightning strike, and it sounded like it was in my backyard. It scared me. We were told that there was problems with food, that they were running out of food, and also that they were having trouble with, how can I delicately put this, sanitation. I don't know who was in charge of the USS Abraham Lincoln, but either they didn't do their job to take care of their sailors, or they were not getting any cooperation from Washington. Either one is distinctly possible the way things go today. By the way, it isn't Hegseth. Oh, my gosh. Could he be any worse? There was a closed-door meeting to talk about the defense budget. He didn't let any Democrats in. Even Republican senators are criticizing the Pentagon for this. There were classified briefings on defense spending, and Pete Hegseth wouldn't let any of the Democratic senators attend. It was only the Republican senators. And even the Republican senators said, this isn't right. You can't do things this way. Good God, this guy is like a monkey. He's like an untrained monkey. I was going to say trained monkey, but there's no training that I can see. What do you expect from a weekend Fox News host that has terrible problems with alcohol? What did you expect? So, yeah, I guess the good news is that it looks like relief is on the way. The bad news is that it took reporting in the Military Times of people who were so desperate that they were ready to harm themselves to bring this problem? Do you think Pete Hegseth didn't know about this? Do you really think the the sailor in charge of the USS Abraham Lincoln, you think that person didn't get in touch with Washington, didn't say, we're having problems with food, we're having problems with the toilets, this is untenable, we need help? I don't believe that for a minute. Yes, I know in every organization there are always toadies who don't want to tell the bosses above them anything bad for fear it will reflect back on them. I get that. But I don't think somebody who is in charge of an aircraft carrier, because that is rarefied air, my friends. And I don't think you get a job like that if you don't care about your sailors. Remember during COVID, there was a sailor who was in charge of a ship, and they needed help with COVID, and they were told, don't go into port, anything, because that was when Donald Trump was trying to downplay COVID, and the person who was head of that ship did anyway what they thought was best for their sailors, and they were removed. Remember, there was that video and audio. He was leaving the ship at 4 or 5 in the morning, and all the sailors came out on deck to give him a send-off because they knew he had put his career, his advancement on the line for them. I can only hope the person in charge of the USS Abraham Lincoln has that same kind of grit. Who knows how the Military Times got the story? What do you think about that? Somebody was talking. It's not like the Military Times was going around interviewing people on the USS Abraham Lincoln. Somebody who they clearly believed told them this. Someday we will find out who. There is other news of this day. We may have to get our friend William Campbell from Ireland back on next week because in the United Kingdom, there's going to be a vote, and Nigel Farage is on the ballot going up against Count Binface. Count Binface, that is the activist and comedian who goes around with a garbage can on his head. A small one, not a huge one, just kind of head-sized garbage can. He made it onto the ballot, and Nigel Farage is running against him. Oh, please, if there is a deity, please let Count Binface win. Please, oh, please, oh, please. I tell you, if Count Binface wins, we are getting William Campbell back here so fast. It will be unbelievable. We'll keep an eye on that one. Nigel Farage, for those of you who are not keeping score, he's like the Donald Trump over there. He's like super, super right wing. And the reason that there's even a vote is because he did, how Chewy Garcia pulled that fast one where he said he was going to run for re-election. And then the very last day to file signatures, he was like, you know what? I think I'll walk away from this seat. And the only person who knew was his chief of staff, and she had gone out and gotten the signatures. And I believe in the final hour of the final day, she took all of her signatures in and got on the ballot. Because Chewy was, at least then, respected. Nobody had gotten signatures to run against him in the primary. So she was a shoo-in. That kind of maneuver, how it made a lot of people mad, and it kind of stunk. Yeah, well, Nigel Farage did kind of the same thing. He was in a bit of trouble, and he called for an election. It was a maneuver that was designed to give him strength in government again. But that was before Count Binface decided to run against him. It was supposed to be a maneuver where he would call an election. You know, he would be probably the only person on the ballot. Bing, bang, boom. He's back in power. No harm, no foul. Oh, please, oh, please, oh, please. Please, please, please let Count Binface win. Is it wrong? Is it wrong that that's what I want? I don't think so. First of all, I don't really like Nigel Farage. And second of all, yeah, we all know that in the world of politics, sometimes people use the system or loopholes in the system to get what they want, to get where they want to go. But that doesn't mean we have to like it and support it. And for the most part, we don't. So let's see what happens. What do you say, kids? By the way, we are going to be talking about the news of the day with you, taking your calls, reading your texts. This is 773 763 9278 773 763 9278. So join the conversation and let me know what you want to talk about. You probably saw the reporting on cable news today. You know how the lawyers for the Kennedy Center went to court and the court ruled that Donald Trump's name had to be taken off the building, and it was. Oh, by the way, his name has been taken off the building, but apparently the powers that be have decided that the scaffolding that was used to take the name down should stay, and it's all been covered with tarps. So yes, Trump's name is off the building, but they continue to have a tarp there, so you can't really tell. And now there is reporting today that the Kennedy Center board, the previous board, was fired. So Donald Trump could put his cronies in, and you know that's a recipe for disaster. Well, apparently, behind the scenes, while all this was going on, they were trying to figure out a way to get his name, to get Trump's name back on the building. Because remember, Donald Trump said when all of the people who were supposed to play at the Kennedy Center quit, and he couldn't get anybody decent to perform there, and he pretended like that's okay. And then he announced, because it was sitting empty more often than not, he said, oh, you know, it needs renovation, so we're going to close it for 2 years. The fear was, like with the East Wing at the White House, that he was just going to tear it down. So the Kennedy Center was closed by Donald Trump for renovations. But last spring, a judge blocked that order. Now, the board of the Kennedy Center, again, everyone a Trump toady, they're trying to go around the judge's order. They are trying to find another way to close the Kennedy Center for renovations. And as a part of that, they've also voted that Trump's name should be back on the building. You know, when they go home at night, seriously, this is something I wonder. Yes, some people have drunk the Kool-Aid and it's Donald Trump all the time. Some people understand he's transactional and they want something from him. And so they do his bidding. But if you don't need anything from him and you haven't drunk the Kool-Aid so that you just are viewing him as a cult figure, if you're in that third group of people, maybe they have a lot of money. And, you know, Donald Trump loves rich people. And rich people are generally pretty careful politically. They don't want to stick their neck out because whether the president is a Republican or a Democrat, they want their wealth protected. They want their companies protected. What do they say to their family when they go home at night? Oh, you're not going to believe what happened today. Oh, yeah, yeah, we thought this was a done deal. His name was off the wall. But some people on the board have figured out that maybe there's a loophole they can get around the court and quote unquote renovate the Kennedy Center. And oh, by the way, part of that renovation, we need to put his name back there. We absolutely need to put his name back on the building. These people aren't elected officials. It's not like their political life depends on Donald Trump, but clearly there must be something either in their professional life or in their personal life that means they cannot afford to alienate Donald Trump. They're getting something from him. Maybe it's government contracts. Who knows? Maybe it's just the joy of being a special person in his life. Maybe they get invited to Mar-a-Lago for special dinners. But whatever it is, they've sold out the Kennedy Center that they are on the board of because there isn't one left. At least on the Federal Communications Commission, we still have Anna Gomez, who will stand up to Brendan Carr and say, nope, you're lying about what you're doing. This is all an effort to suppress freedom of the press. But there's nobody like that on the Kennedy Center board. Toadies are us. So, yeah, that's happening. Did I don't remember if I gave out the phone number. Yeah, it's Thursday. 773-763-9278. 773-763 WCPT. We already have about a dozen texts that have come in. Lady B is anxious. Oh my gosh, we got calls coming in already too. Oh, okay. Well, you know what? Since everybody seems to be eager to join the conversation, because I hate it when we get to 3 o'clock and there are still people on the phone lines whose calls I haven't been able to get to, and I apologize. Also, sometimes people text me that they're trying to get through on the phone lines and they can't. We have phone lines, but they are not large in number. I think we can take 5 or 6, maybe 5. I'm not sure. Calls. 6. Lady B says 6. We can take 6 people, and Lady B puts them on hold. And then as I talk to them and we hang up, that creates a line that's free. But oftentimes the phone lines are full. And that's why a lot of times people will text me and they'll say, I've been calling and I can't get through on the phone line. That's why. It's because Joan is not taking the calls as quickly as she should to free up more lines for more people to talk. So, Lady B, we got time for a call or two. Let's go to the phone lines right now and talk to Dave, who is on the line from Hoffman Estates. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Joan. Yeah, that commander of that Abraham Lincoln now. How soon do you think before they relieve him and it's going to say due to loss of confidence?
Yeah, really. Really. Because, Trump has to be furious because this really makes our military look so bad. As one of the opinion pieces I read was like, we are supposed to have the greatest military in the world, and we've got a ship that can't get enough food and can't flush all the toilets. I mean, it's a huge embarrassment. And, when the Pentagon was embarrassed before, Trump apparently called Hegseth into the White House and was screaming at him, when there were reports coming out that we were running out of munitions. And that's when Hegseth said, oh, it wasn't me. It was my deputy. He's the one who was in charge of all that. He is the one who has led both of us astray, boss. Well, when it comes to this, who do you think Pete Hegseth, who's he going to blame now? Is he going to go back to Steven Feinberg and say, oh, by the way, this was his fault, too. He was in charge of making sure all the ships had enough food.
Yeah, they had I don't know if it was on that ship or if it was one of these military bases where they took a picture even where they had maggots in some of this food.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I'd have to follow up on that some more to find out if it was at one of the military bases or the ships. And then,
where did you see that picture?
It would have probably been in one of either the Military Times or one of them. I'll have to follow up.
Who do you think leaked it? Who do you think leaked that story to the Military Times? God, I hope it was the guy in charge of the USS Abraham Lincoln, but who knows?
It could have been some of these sailors, too, because they've had a thing where they could anonymously do this stuff, and now the Navy and that, they're trying to cut that down from anonymously. And I'm thinking, well, how would it be anonymous if they know who did it? But,
yeah, really.
And mentioning on that plumbing and that, the sister ship that the USS George H.W. Bush, they had to pull that in that time to port because of the plumbing again. And I was reading that it's that littoral ship, it's supposed to be the modern thing, but the plumbing ain't. Somehow it still don't work correctly. And for them, each time they come and clear it out, basically, the plumbing, they say it costs like $400,000.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And there was one other ship, though, that been out almost as long, and I was just reading, it just came to port, the USS Thomas Hudner pulled into its home port out of its destroyer, and it returned to Naval Station Mayport, Florida, after over half a year taking part in major U.S. combat operations and blockading oil tankers, because that one was, it was over in the Caribbean at first, and then part of that blockade of Venezuela.
We are going to have to do so much repair work on our military. And particularly, I'm talking to Randy Manor today at 3 o'clock. So I really want to talk to him about this story about the USS Abraham Lincoln. And, there's so much going on with Pete Hegseth and the military. That we're going to be lucky to get all the discussion done in the 30 minutes that we're going to have him. Dave, thank you so much for the call.
Let me get off so you got some other calls, but I just thought I'd touch base with you on that. All right, be well. Before
I go to a break, somebody texted in when I was just talking about Pete Hegseth, you just trashed every recovering alcoholic as a useless person, even in recovery. Pete Hegseth isn't in recovery. Pete Hegseth, when confronted with his drinking to excess on a regular basis, Pete Hegseth drinking himself to the point where his friends had to literally carry him. Pete Hegseth, you'll recall, said, if you give me this job, I will stop drinking. That's not somebody who's in recovery. That's not somebody who says, I have a problem and I'm going to tackle it. That's somebody who's making a deal. Yeah, I'll stop drinking if you buy me a new car. I'll stop drinking if you give me this job. And I don't know if he's drinking or not. There were initially some reports when he first was Secretary of Defense in professional settings. There were some rumors that he indeed had not stopped drinking. So don't give me that I'm trashing alcoholics in recovery, because Pete Hegseth ain't that. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We are reading your texts and taking your calls. Let's go to the phone lines. Pam is on the line in Chicago. Hey, Pam, thanks so much for the call.
Oh, no problem, Joan. It is great to hear you. Great discussion. First, let me say you are absolutely correct. I believe Hegseth, they call him Kegseth, is still drinking. And what's important about that is because we believe those who are familiar with alcoholism and the steps to stopping, we know, Joan, that I believe alcoholism is a disease. And so this is an illness that he's not taking seriously. And you're right on the money. You don't negotiate. You'll stay with me. I'll stop drinking. You won't leave me. You give me something. I'll stop drinking. That's not the premise of really trying to be in true recovery. So you're absolutely correct. The military. Joan, this was one of my biggest fears, why I did not want this adjudicated sexual abuser with credible allegations of child rape in the White House commander-in-chief because of our military. You recall his first term during COVID, and I can't remember which ship, but the admiral, I guess, or the captain of that ship had to write a letter, Joan, because his crew were dying of COVID. Ugh. And do you recall that?
Yep.
I want to say it was the Roosevelt, but I'm not sure. But he had to sacrifice himself and call out on civilians so that they could get the crew help from COVID. Mm-hmm. So now we have military people who are trying to commit suicide. Joan, this is the very reason I didn't want him in office. He never cared about military. I mean, the suckers and losers.
That's right.
That is still the premise. And the last statement I'm going to make is that it's incumbent upon people like you, me, and the rest of us to come out and vote in November. And, Joan, I'm committed to doing all that I can because, Joan, I'm impacted. I have 2 relatives who are have serious illnesses. And certainly his policies are affecting their care.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we tried to warn people, right? I'm going to try not to let tears come to my eyes, but we tried to warn people about this.
And I don't understand why people who lived through his first term, and if they were paying any kind of attention, he lied like a rug during his first term. You couldn't believe anything that came out of his mouth. But suddenly he's running again, and he's making people all these promises, and they're buying into it. That was part of what just I couldn't understand.
So the last 2 points I'm going to leave us with, I'm optimistic that in November that the Democrats will take over. I don't care, moderate, corporate, at this point, DSA,
really?
Progressive. We just need decent, right-thinking people. And then lastly, Joan, we've got to be on guard. He is going to try every violent method and any other method to interfere with this vote. Suppression, voter purging. They talked about perhaps ICE will be antagonizing people. The FBI could be sent in, DOJ. So we've got to be on guard and be well protected on our end, Joan, at these voting polls, because he's trying to take away mail-in ballots. I mean, so look at everything he's doing. And then also, he's losing on that Epstein front. Katie Fang has some serious lawsuits against him, and she has been successful in court as well as some other organizations. And you know what?
She's in court today, or was in court. She was supposed to be in court about noon Chicago time. I've been looking to see if there's been any reporting, if the court session is over, because the court made a ruling. And the DOJ just didn't do it. And so today's court session was supposed to be a follow-up to find out from the DOJ, we made this ruling and you didn't follow it. You better tell us why. That's the Todd Blanche DOJ. That's if Jim Jordan gets subpoenaed and he can say no. Dr. Fauci gets subpoenaed and now they want to investigate him after he showed up.
And all Dr. Fauci tried to do was to save lives with all of his experience and knowledge. Going to the redactions of the files, Joan, here's what people need to know. Blanche classified some of the predators as victims. So he used that excuse in order to redact the files. But for the real victims, he released some of their identifying information. Do you see how corrupt he is? So some of the
and he made a speech today. I think it was today. He made a speech to DOJ employees about how he was going to lead the office with integrity. With integrity. I wonder how many of them laughed.
November, we've got to win. We've got to come out big, and we've got to come out strong. And I believe we're going to do that because we cannot tolerate fascism. We cannot. That's where we're in right now, and that's my belief. We cannot tolerate it. We don't need a dictator. And we need to show the Republican elected officials that we're not going to take it, and that with the people, the power is with the people.
Thank you,
John.
I agree with you 100%. And Pam's absolutely right. Thanks, Pam, for the call. The midterms are going to be dicey, and we have to be ready for that. Real quick, I want to share a text. I was talking about how the USS Abraham Lincoln, according to the Military Times, not only are people trying self-harm, but they've had a real problem getting food. They've had a real problem with sanitation. Somebody texted in, the Lincoln is provisioned by the 5th Fleet Command Center in the Middle East. It's been destroyed. That's a consequence of war, not poor planning. It's implying it's really more to fill the news cycle than a surprise. If the center that is supposed to supply your ships gets destroyed, you know what a good commander does? They find another way to supply the ships. It's not, well, sorry, guys. You're not going to get enough food because, this thing was destroyed and we're throwing up our hands. We have no idea what to do. More to fill a news cycle? Well, maybe this is something you knew about. Maybe this was not a surprise to you. But when the Military Times reported that at least 3 sailors had attempted self-harm because of the conditions and because of how long they had been on the USS Abraham Lincoln, I disagree with you. I think that's news. And for most of us, it was a surprise. And if it wasn't a surprise to you, then what were you doing to fix it? Ooh, I don't know. People on the text line are feisty today, and that's making me feisty. Let's go back to the phone lines. Our good friend Ron from Chicago is on the line. Hey, Ron, what do you want to talk about today?
Yes, I hope nobody was listening to Trump today when he said that a baby should not be given just one vaccine for 5 diseases that they should be given. They should go back there 5 different times. Did you hear that one?
Yeah. And I guess the good news is, that he's not saying don't get the vaccines, but anybody who's ever had a baby knows that there are some vaccines that are put together, the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella. They can do that in one shot. Now what Donald Trump wants is each and every one of those to be a separate shot.
Right.
If that makes him happy. It's not going to make parents happy, and it sure isn't going to make kids happy, but at least he's not saying don't get them.
Oh, okay.
So there's a low bar.
Yeah, and also, is it just a coincidence that Caroline Leavitt was left behind on Air Force One, and the next day she put in her resignation?
Was she? Was she on Air Force One?
I think she was.
I know Stephen Miller was on there, and there's been reported that Marco Rubio was on there, but I didn't.
I thought she was on there.
I don't know. I haven't seen a list of who was on there and who wasn't.
Okay. All right. I'll check it.
But I will look into that because you know what? Because somebody was asking me, why did she resign? And I said, well, I don't know. She did just have her second kid. Maybe that's something to do with it. But if I was left behind by Donald Trump as he was off saving himself, I might have a problem with that too. I might have a real problem with that, especially I've got kids and you took Natalie Harp, who just is your printer girl and you didn't take Caroline Leavitt. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll see if somebody's reporting on who was left behind.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. We are going to take a break. We're going to come back with more calls and texts right after this.
This is WCPT 820. where facts matter.
Want to join the conversation?
I just wanted to thank your station for consistently reporting the facts. In a world of clickbait headlines, your station is who I trust for the real news.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820.
Thank you so much to the texter who remembered the name of that captain that stood up to Trump during COVID in his first term and was removed from command. And there was a car waiting for him. They pulled into dock, and it was 4 or 5 in the morning. I remember the video, and it was dark. It was like dawn was just coming. And there were more than 1,000 sailors that came out on the deck, and they chanted his name over and over again. Captain Crozier, Captain Crozier, Captain Crozier. I'm not sure whatever became of him. We should look into that. My guess is, since that certainly derailed his career, my guess is he is no longer in the Navy. But if anybody has followed him, please let me know, and I will look into that myself. Let's go to the phone lines. Our good friend Roosevelt's on the line. Hey, Roosevelt.
Joan, finally, I'm getting through. I'm telling Lady B, I've been trying for days.
I'm so sorry. We've had so many callers, and Joan has to do a better job of getting them on the air.
Okay, I want to go straight to the point here. So, what do you know about this knucklehead, Peter Schweizer? He writes all these books. He wrote the book prior to the Clinton-Trump election, Clinton Cash. That's just one example. But the latest one is the one I want you to focus. I just sent you a video of Maria Valteromo in January. Where he interviewed him, and he specifically, this author, quote, journalist, supposedly wrote another book in January, and it always comes up to being a number one bestseller, New York bestseller. And now this guy, thanks to him, I don't know if you know it or not, but a few days ago, speaking to Marco Rubio, he has claimed, thanks to this book, that the Mexican government is involved into, let's just say, making Trump look bad. So they're thinking of closing some of the 53 consulates, which is the most any nation has in this United States. So I don't know if you know that. And on the cover of the latest book, which he went on sale January 20th of this year, is the president of Mexico. Next to her is AOC. Next to her is Obama, and next to Obama is Biden. So this guy writes these books, and he's worked. I did a little homework. He's worked for George W. Bush in 2008 and 2009. His name is Peter Schweizer. He's also known as David Schweizer, from what I understand.
I'm not familiar with him or his books, and
okay.
Why did Maria Bartiromo is one of these people who is I don't know if she's just trying not to offend or if she's really ignorant. I mean, she will interview Trump and he will say things that are demonstrably untrue, and she appears to believe him. So I don't consider her a journalist. She hasn't been a journalist in a long time. And I really pay as little attention to her as possible because I think she has sacrificed her good name.
Yeah, but I think these people are working on using an excuse to go into Mexico. That's just my theory, because he's designated the cartels of Mexico as terrorists. So this adds on to it with the aid of bilingual Marco Rubio, supposedly somebody that's Hispanic or Latin or whatever, but he's not.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Roosevelt. I think Donald Trump would like to invade anybody he thought that he could dominate. But Mexico is, I don't know that thinks that he could get in there and somehow cause upheaval and then get out as some kind of hero. He talks a good game, but that's why I think the people of Cuba and the people of Greenland are far more at risk, because he sees those places as places where his military might could win the day. That's why I also don't think we're going to worry about going across the border to Canada, because I think he knows that is not something that he wants to get involved with.
And another reason why I'm bringing it up is it was brought up on the radio station on the program that I contribute to in Spanish, saying that this guy, Peter Schweitzer, is working against the Morena party, which is the party of the previous president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. So they're working in cahoots, Peter Schweitzer, Fox News, and Marco Rubio, into closing some of these Mexican consulates. So I'm going to send you some more stuff so you can look it up.
Yep.
All right? To give you a little bit more perspective of what's going on with these people.
Yes, I would appreciate that.
Thank you very much for your time. I know you're running short. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Roosevelt. Thanks for the call. And again, as I said at the top of the show, I oftentimes get texts from people who say, I've been trying to call in since the show started. I can't get through. We have 6 lines, and sometimes they are full. And once they are full, nobody else can get through. So Joan is going to try to do a better job. Matter of fact, let's go to Jim, who's on the line from Chicago. Hey, Jim.
Hi, Joan. Who hired this rainmaker? You've got to identify this person, because it's been raining since last week. Whatever, the guy's doing a marvelous job of making it rain. But you were talking about Perez. 2 weeks ago on BBC, he was involved in count the zeros, some contribution to his campaign. It was in the billions. That was really dicey, and nobody knew what to do about it. And then Trump has hired a QAnon figure to accompany unaccompanied minors to court and gave him a $250 million contract. Now, my question is that coming out of our Treasury? Probably. And the point is, this guy was involved in child trafficking, which really makes it spooky. And these contracts he's handing out, Joan, are coming out of our taxpayers' money. The Republicans are mad about their taxes. That's all they know is taxes. How could they be in love with this character?
I know.
Blowing through money like a maniac.
And, the Republican Party, whenever a Democrat's in office, they're always screaming about the deficit, oh, my God. And all of a sudden, nobody's talking about the deficit. And it's bigger than it's been probably in my lifetime. It's bigger than that right now.
Well, sure. But, taxes is there. You see anybody in Illinois run on taxes. But our taxes are going to the most preposterous things. The pool, did he pay for that? He's got enough dough to do it. And then his son-in-law, his brother, bought the Lakers with the guy from Disney for $16 billion yesterday. These people are making money that nobody would in your wildest dreams. You couldn't even imagine it. I don't know what Christian's brother did for a living.
I was reading today that Jim seems so weird.
Working.
Apparently, the reason why the man who owns the Lakers is willing to sell it to Jared Kushner's brother and Bob Iger, late of Disney, is because he needs the money. Who owns a sports franchise in today's world and runs out of money? I don't know.
He owns the Dodgers. That character owns the Dodgers. Well, he's not the sole owner, but he's certainly a large proportion of the Dodgers, which are worth a fortune. But that's not the point. The point is, where did Kushner's brother get the money? I never saw him. Did he have a job? I'd like to see his.
That is a very good question, because remember, it wasn't all that long ago that there was a big office building in Manhattan that the family owned, and they were going to lose it. They were going to lose it because the debt that they had taken on to buy it, suddenly the building wasn't as valuable. They were underwater. And I believe that might have been the first time Saudi Arabia bailed out the Kushner family. I think they gave him like a big loan. So you're absolutely right. Where did the brother, I think his name is Josh, where did Josh get all that money? Where did he? Maybe he's on the board of his brother's hedge fund. His brother's investment fund, the one where he takes in billions of dollars from people and charges them hundreds of millions of dollars in fees. So he and Ivanka are sitting pretty, but nobody seems to be making a lot of money with that fund.
And when the Saudi Arabia guy killed Khashoggi, he chopped up in little pieces. Kushner was out there with him the next day playing Xbox with him at night. These two idiots are playing.
Yeah, that I think was one of the initial things that Saudi Arabia got from us.
Yeah, that means that Kushner, all he could think was zeros. How many zeros can you fork over? I mean, this outfit, nobody would believe this in American history. I mean, how in God's name? Well, that's why we got to get. Once we win this thing, that thing in Wisconsin was very heartening. I think. Was it a lot of people came out for the Democratic, it was really way up.
Yeah.
So I think people are really, and they were from all over the state, Joan. So,
and let's hope if people are willing to get motivated and come out for a primary, that they will definitely come out for the midterms. If people come out in large numbers, Democrats will win wildly across the country.
Well, yeah. All right, John, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I've been getting a number of texts. I was talking about the Kennedy Center, which has been covered by a tarp since Donald Trump's name was removed. And a couple of people have texted in, is it possible that his name wasn't really removed and that's why the tarp is there? I would be as skeptical as you, but Jim Acosta, who used to be a CNN anchor reporter and now does his own independent media, he snuck a look. Apparently, it's guarded. The reason, because I was like, why hasn't anybody, just an activist group, pulled that tarp down? Apparently, it is being guarded. And yet, Jim Acosta, this was a while ago, snuck a look behind the tarp. I don't know how he distracted the security people. And he said Trump's name is gone. Trump's name is gone from the building. For those of you who are just tuning in, we were talking at the beginning of the show about how the Kennedy Center board that is filled, Donald Trump fired the entire board. He fired everybody there and replaced them all with his sycophants. And the board is trying to figure out how to get around a court ruling that said that Donald Trump cannot tear apart the Kennedy Center for quote unquote renovation, and Donald Trump cannot have his name on the building. There are reports today that the board has been trying to look for a legal workaround or a loophole so that they can do what clearly Donald Trump wants them to do, which is at the very least gut the inside of the Kennedy Center. But there are some who believe that if he is allowed to quote unquote renovate the Kennedy Center, he will do to the Kennedy Center what he did to the East Wing of the White House. Remember when he started building his ballroom and he said it was just going to attach to the White House, that he said plainly, none of the structures of the White House were going to be affected. And then we all wake up one morning and the East Wing is gone. It has been destroyed. I haven't seen anything like that since Mayor Daley sent bulldozers in the middle of the night to tear up Meigs Field because he wanted to turn that land into a park. Only he was getting pushback because lots of any news organization that had a helicopter based it at Meigs because it was close by, and a lot of CEOs used Meigs as the airport for their jets coming in and out because it was so much faster and easier than for them to get to O'Hare or Pewaukee. And so what did Mayor Daley do? He sent bulldozers in the middle of the night, and they tore up the runways. And there were some planes that were actually stranded there because they were on the ground, and there were a lot of people who were not very happy. Okay, we're going to take a break for news. We are going to be back with much more after this.
You're the only voice of reason on the radio.
You give me hope.
Having listened to you every day.
Thank you for your clear insight.
Always felt a little bit smarter.
I listen to you every single day. I keep coming back to this station, and thank you for what you do.
On WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to the day. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
We are welcoming back retired Major General Randy Manner to our airwaves. And man, what a day to have a military expert when the military, so much of the military and its leadership is in the news. Randy, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me again. I always enjoy it, and thank you for what you do.
I want to start with the USS Abraham Lincoln. That apparently has been having food shortages, has been having trouble with sanitation, was supposed to be sent home last May, but was extended with no end in sight. And now we're hearing from the Military Times, they're reporting that at least one, as you heard at the top of the hour, and I've read from them, as 3 sailors have attempted self-harm. Have you seen anything like this before? I mean, is this just what happens when there's a war?
So, first of all, my heart and soul and thoughts go out to all the military that are deployed, and probably more importantly, their family members who are obviously not getting all the news that they should have because of the lack of transparency of the administration. I thought the Secretary of Defense's comments earlier today were just dismissive, and they were disrespectful. It basically said, hey, everybody's getting what they need, whatever we can provide them. And it's just absurd that he minimized the impact on these sailors on this world record setting, a modern day since World War II record of over 240 days since a break at a port, and then obviously a very long deployment. So where there is smoke, there is fire. It is the lack of transparency by the administration and the Secretary of Defense that is, quite frankly, whitewashing some of the challenges that they have. And don't get me wrong, heck, I've been there in the field when you didn't have enough food, you didn't have enough stuff, and it's cold and it's hot and it's whatever. So being in the military can be hard. On the other side of the coin, when you have this much noise, it is very, very probable that there are significant challenges on board that ship.
Who would be responsible for making sure, we're running out of food, or the food is rotting or rotten, we need to get more food? Would that be the commander of the USS Abraham Lincoln?
So the commander, the captain of the ship, is responsible for everything that happens or fails to happen on the ship. And then it rolls from there as well, meaning that the admirals above them, as well as the Department of Navy, the Secretary of Defense, even the president himself is responsible for any of the shortfalls that there might be. So I need to be clear with all the people that are listening that it's more complex than it first comes out in the news reports. But as I said before, where there is smoke, there is usually fire. And so therefore, I side on the side of the families to say, let's have full disclosure here about what is really going on, and let's take care of these sailors.
I don't know if this is something, that you can answer about how the Navy works, unless it's across all services. The Military Times article, they talked to a woman whose husband was one of those who apparently tried to or did jump off the ship. And one of the things, first of all, she was having a terrible time getting in contact with her husband, but she said that one of the things that she knew that he would be concerned about was would this lead to a dishonorable discharge? Because she said, the military has been his life. And on top of whatever struggles he's going through now, she said, she implied that a dishonorable discharge would just crush him. Would a dishonorable discharge come from somebody who has enough of a mental health crisis to attempt self-harm?
So, no, that is not, well, correction. Under previous administrations, if someone was to consider self-harm, they would go through mental counseling and would be retained in the Navy. They would not be just automatically kicked out based on that. They would do their very best to help that person to return to duty. And it is extremely unlikely in any other administration, no matter what the service, that someone would ever face a dishonorable discharge. Although, of course, this is a very serious situation for that wife and her husband sailor. The reality is that we have to demand accountability and transparency of the chain of command, starting, of course, with their senators and their representatives, because clearly the president is not listening.
I guess I know we have no way of verifying this, but Adam Kinzinger, who, as of course was in the military, was interviewed by CNN, and he said that he believes that the people having mental health crises, that it's not just limited to the rank and file. He believes that some of the higher ranking personnel on that are probably undergoing the same sorts of mental health crises. I guess that would stand to reason, right?
So I believe that is absolutely the case, that it can affect anybody of any rank, because the responsibility of leading these sailors by the Navy, by the chiefs, by the officers, it is significant. And those that take their responsibilities seriously, which is the not just the majority, it's virtually all of them, that's a great weight to bear when you are deployed and you know that you by yourself may not be able to make things a lot better. So I believe that the way the previous Congressman Kinzinger had said, I believe that to be very likely.
Yeah, and the statement that the U.S. Navy released said that they've seen no increase at all in mental health problems or suicidal ideation. Nope, they haven't. Nope, not there, Andy, not there.
Yeah, so that's a clear indication, because of how fast they responded, that it is very unlikely they have done any kind of morale survey on that ship, because they, quite frankly, don't want to know. Because if there's no data to support it, then you can just tell the people whatever you want. So notice the way that I read that release as well. There's no indication, no data. Well, sure there's not, because they're not looking. And so that's why I regard that as perhaps a truthful statement, but quite frankly, that is not a transparent statement, and it is misleading. It's totally misleading.
Would it be the captain of the USS Abraham Lincoln? Would it be up to them? Should they know what's going on? Should they know that their sailors are in trouble? And is it possible that the captain or someone in the captain's inner circle might have been the one to let the Military Times know what was going on?
It is extremely doubtful that the captain said anything to the Military Times. It is far more likely that perhaps a sailor or some other junior officer had said something to someone along the way. However, I do not know. I think what's most important is all of your listeners have to understand that we have a lack of transparency by the Secretary of Defense himself, who dismissed these reports as not representative and they are misleading. He didn't address the problem. He tried to deflect. And that is an indication of hiding things. And that's exactly what is going on by this administration. The military chain of command, they are not supposed to go to the press. They are not supposed to go outside their chain of command. They're supposed to use the chain of command. The problem is the chain of command ends with what? The Secretary of Defense and then the president, which quite frankly, they're not going to reveal anything. And they haven't.
And apparently, Pete Hegseth didn't realize that we were running out of munitions. That wasn't that wasn't something he knew. It was his number two, Feinberg. That's Stephen Feinberg. That's the guy who should have told everybody what was going on, Donald Trump. Don't yell at me, though apparently Donald Trump has been screaming at Pete Hegseth on a regular basis. But Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, he didn't know, Randy. Nobody told him.
So I regard that as a complete fabrication by the Secretary of Defense. I believe he knows fully, and he is deflecting and blaming someone else. I will tell you that even though I do not have any access to any classified information, and even if I did, I would not be allowed to be able to share it. I will tell you that through by CENTCOM's own figures, it is obvious how many missiles we've been using against how many targets. And I'm talking order of magnitude. I'm not trying to say exactly 823. I'm trying to say it is clear that somewhere between 25% to 75% of critical munitions are gone. And that is something that is available in the public record and released by CENTCOM itself. So the fact that all of a sudden this revelation came up, it's complete crap. It is complete crap. The Secretary of Defense had no idea. It's complete crap. The president didn't have any idea, unless the president is not listening to his advisors, which, by the way, that would not be a surprise to me, because no one wants to tell him anything that he doesn't want to hear.
Really? Who wants to be the one to go into the Oval Office and give him bad news? Because he does have a record of blaming the messenger. I mean, that's when I've talked to political science professors, that's one of the things that when they point out when somebody tries to be a dictator, one of the ways that their whole regime gets weakened and eventually collapses is because nobody will tell the leader the truth, because they know whoever brings him the truth is going to be held responsible for it.
And be shot if you were in Russia. In the United States, you're going to be fired. Mm-hmm. And then after you're fired, they are going to go after you, remove your security clearance the way they did with the previous Secretary of the Air Force, Kendall, where he allegedly revealed information about Air Force One, which I find nothing in the public media that says that. It is purely them being vindictive against anybody who is saying anything negative against the administration. And that's why we have to stand up for the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. Every single American. I don't care if you're a MAGA person or you're far left. It doesn't matter. We all have the right to speak our voice. And right now, the president and the administration are doing everything they can to suppress voices that they do not agree with.
There has been reporting today. I'm switching over to the food container escape that Donald Trump and Natalie Harp and Walt Nuda and Dan Schiavino made in a food container leaving the NATO summit because of a report that Iran was really ready to assassinate him. There were reporting that maybe somebody saw somebody with a shoulder-mounted missile launcher. There's reporting today that intel, that alarm, came from Israel. But when our CIA looked over the data, they passed it on with a very low confidence. They believed that Israel was planting that information to get a reaction from Donald Trump. Donald Trump had resumed bombing in Iran, and the argument is Israel thought he would continue to bomb Iran if he thought that Iran was really coming for him, but that it was all a big ruse. That seems pretty believable to me, but maybe you are going to tell me that at that level, shenanigans like that don't happen.
They absolutely happen. And remember, the reason why we're in this war in the first place is because the Israeli prime minister convinced the first president in decades to attack Israel's enemy using American lives and American weapons and American taxpayer money. So it is absolutely believable that the Israelis would provide that kind of information. It is very believable. And it's very important for me to say that when there's an assassination attempt against the president, they are not supposed to be advertised. You don't say anything because you don't want I'm talking about under normal administrations. You don't say anything because unless it's a public assassination attempt, you don't want people to either determine that you detected it or that you intervened. So the bottom line is, no offense, but this president loves to brag about how many times he's been attempted to be assassinated and targeted so that he can gain sympathy from his MAGA base. And that is my blunt opinion. Presidents don't brag ever about assassination attempts, but this guy does. And so could it be true that there was an assassination attempt? Extremely low probability. And by the way, it is my professional opinion, the Iranians do not want anybody but Trump in the White House because they can play him like a puppet. And
yes.
They are. Yes. So the point is, the Iranians do not want him to go. They want him to stay in because they can really cause pain to the United States in addition to what pain the administration is inflicting upon itself. And that is my blunt professional opinion. They want him to stay.
Michael Wolff, the author of several books about what goes on inside the White House, he posted something on social media. I don't know if it was today or yesterday. And he said that when Donald Trump talks about threats against him, he said the people around him have told Michael Wolff, you can see fear, but also pride. He's proud because he's the man. He's the big man everybody wants to get. And regardless of whatever fear there is, he's proud that everybody is targeting him because that reinforces this idea. He's the one. He's the only one who matters.
It's very believable. And that's one of the many, many factors that go into my opinion about that he relishes it. And I do not want him to end his term by being assassinated. But I will tell you, the president himself seems to invite it. And that's just so wrong. It's so pathetically wrong.
As long as we're talking about the Middle East, I was reading about this recent protection pact among Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan. They each bring, Pakistan has a nuclear arsenal. They each bring something to the table. And they have apparently signed a deal where it's like NATO. An attack on one is an attack on all. When I saw that, I thought, it was bound to happen because the countries in the Middle East are really starting to wake up to the fact that Donald Trump and our military cannot protect them the way they thought that they would be protected. And now they're making their own arrangements. What do you think of that?
One of the unintended consequences of the Israeli decision to get the president, to convince the president to attack and the Israelis to attack, the unintended consequence is it is uniting the rest of the Arab world against, quite frankly, Israel and the United States. So here you have three countries, Saudi Arabia, one of the most prosperous nations in that region. The most prosperous, wealthy nation. So we're talking about the ability to write checks for billions of dollars. We have Turkey, one of the largest militaries in the region, a member of NATO, integrated into the command structure of NATO. And then you have Pakistan with, no kidding, nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. So now Israel is facing a triad that if they were to attack any of those three nations, then potentially, again, attack against one is attack against all. Now, there is the implied situation that it's not just Israel. It could be Iran as well. And that's the other side of this coin. So basically what we're doing is because the direct result of the president of the United States attacking Iran, the world is now becoming more and more of a tinderbox. Because even if there is a false flag operation against any of those three nations, you could have missiles flying and then an increased involvement way beyond the borders of the Middle East, involving a member of NATO, involving a country with nuclear weapons. And believe me, India will not stand by, even if it's something that has to do with the Middle East. So this tinderbox that the president of the United States himself has quite frankly started, we are in a far more dangerous world than anybody can imagine. Quite frankly, probably since the missile crisis of 1962, with President Kennedy. And that wasn't necessarily caused by the president himself, as we know.
There is reporting that Donald Trump has announced that the United States, has closed the Strait of Hormuz. And we seem to be the only people who believe that is true. As Iran is saying, like, dude, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So I see a president who is desperate to get out of this and doesn't have the expertise surrounding him of anybody who could create a viable path out of this. He's gotten rid of all the senior career diplomats. He's gotten rid of all the experts. He only has his toadies around him. They don't know what to do. How do we get out of this, Randy?
Well, I'll be blunt. There are three ways. One, there's 82 days until the midterms elections. We can talk about what the president, in my opinion, is going to do for blue cities and for particular battleground states where oppose him. We have 82 days until election. The second thing is that we need to stop him by lawsuits at every single turn. And the third thing is we have to have public and extremely large numbers of people to be able to protest his actions as being illegal, immoral, inappropriate, and not in the best interest of the United States. We have to take action because no action means that we basically allow this to continue.
A while back, you and I debated the likelihood that the National Guard would be deployed to polling places to kind of stir the pot. That, I don't know about you, but to me, that now seems like the least offensive, least risky thing that could possibly happen. Because at least the National Guard, they're our people, they're us, as opposed to deploying ICE or deploying the FBI. I mean, I sort of long for the days when we thought that the National Guard might be deployed in the midterm elections, Randy.
No, okay, so I want to be very clear. I don't agree with you, Joan, at all. The military has no role whatsoever, zero role in our elections, zero role. Not only is it illegal, it's something where the president, you can imagine, he's not going to deploy any guardsmen other than if he asks the governor to do it on a token basis to any red state or any red city. He's going to be very selective, potentially, about where he deploys the National Guard and to what states. So you can imagine blue cities within red states are a number one target. A number two target could be perhaps if he was to invoke the Insurrection Act, then he could move military into anywhere in the United States if he so desired. Lastly, he now has his own personal attorney as the Attorney General of the United States. I believe it is a 100% probability that this Attorney General will seize ballot boxes in areas where the president is losing in terms of representative votes. Notice I'm not saying 90 or 80. No, 100%. That's not grabbing all the ballot boxes. It's the ones in those areas that could switch the House of Representatives or even the Senate. And so
I think you're exactly correct on that. And my question is, what do we do about that? I mean, do governors call out the National Guard to protect the places that are counting the ballots and have the election materials? And if the FBI shows up, what happens then?
So elections are state responsibility, state and local. They are not federal. They are state and local. It's only until it gets to Congress, whenever all of the results for the president are verified, as we saw on January 6th, a while back. Well, that day they'll live in infamy. Everything is a state responsibility. So even a red state or a blue state should never, ever, ever call out the military, ever. They should instead use the local and state law enforcement capabilities that they have. There is not going to be some wild insurrection by people across our country on election day. It is going to be made up by the president of the United States to justify the deployment of any military. No military should be near polling places. If there is civil unrest, that's what the police are for.
Well, it's good to know who we can count on for making sure this doesn't happen, because I agree with you. I think that what we saw with the FBI in Georgia was a test case, though I do know that there have been reports that people from the DOJ have been sort of hanging around polling places during primaries. And the second time they tried that in Minnesota, they were not allowed inside. The first time around, people were surprised and they were inside looking around. And this second time, they were not being allowed inside. So let's hope, because we can sort of sense where we're going with this, what's going to be happening, that we will be ready for it. Randy, thank you so much for being here today. I love talking to you, and I thank you very much.
Thank you again for what you do. Bye-bye.
We're going to take a break and be back with more after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Opal Vadhan is here. She is, or once was, a senior advisor to Vice President Kamala Harris. She was an aide to Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton, and long ago she was a White House intern. And she is one of the people who has been in the room where it happens. And we are very, very pleased to welcome her to our airwaves. Opal, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Joan. I'm so thrilled to be with you.
I want you to talk about women in positions of power. I had a discussion yesterday with former Illinois Congressman Joe Walsh, and I told him that I thought, as a country right now, we were too misogynistic to elect a woman to be president of the United States. Not that there isn't a number of women who would be great presidents, but just that there is so much of this country that is still not ready to consider that. You've worked with, well, you were an intern during the Obama years. You've worked with Kamala Harris. You've worked with Hillary Clinton. You've seen women in power up close and personal. When a woman is at a high level of power, did you see anything that they did differently, or any way that they governed differently than the men that you saw?
You know, I will say it's a double-edged sword. And, you know, you're a woman in power and leadership. You have this incredible show, but it's tougher for women, right? I saw both with working with these most talented, brilliant, passionate women who cared about our country so much. If they smiled too much, it would be, oh, they're not tough enough to lead meetings in the Situation Room, right? If you don't smile enough, you're just cold, stoic, unrelatable. And I'd have so many conversations of, no one would say this about men, right? And I'm sure, Joan, you probably deal with this too. It's just women are held to these incredible standards that we have to get to a place where people can keep seeing women in leadership roles. And I think you do a fantastic job. I think more and more we see women run for office, and the more we elect them, that we'll just get to this point that we will see a woman president. But it takes all of us to do the work.
Let's go back to when you were a White House intern. First of all, tell us how that came about.
Oh, wow. It takes over 10 years ago. When I tell you, I never, ever thought I'd work in politics. My parents immigrated to this country, and it's the story of the American dream, which Democrats, we so believe in, right? They immigrated to this country, worked hard, and then 20-something years later, their daughter is interning in the Obama White House for the first Black president. But I had never voted. I didn't know how government affected my life day in, day out. I was interning at MSNBC, now MS News, and a producer was like, you should apply for a White House internship. I didn't know politics, but I took the chance and applied, got waitlisted, and I was starting my senior year of college. I was going to intern at Nightly News with Brian Williams at the time, for those who remember. And I got an email saying I've been taken off the wait list and I've got accepted into this internship program. But when I tell you, at that time, too, it felt like to be a White House intern, you had to go to an Ivy League school. You had to know someone who knew the political world, your parents may be donors, but I didn't come from it. And I say this story so often of, I once said Michelle Obama, And another intern goes, you can't say that. You have to say POTUS or FLOTUS. And I go, what does that mean? So I understand when people are like, we don't understand politics. Politics doesn't affect us day in and day out. It was only because I did that internship. I saw what government could do for people and what these public servants, those who work there, those who lead us, really care about country to make our lives better. And it changed my whole life.
I know that you've been named a Pritzker Fellow at the University of Chicago Institute of Politics. And I was looking over some of the seminars that you have been hosting, and one, Finding Your Way into Public Service. Since you sort of fell into it by accident, what do you tell? I would assume that the people you're speaking to, since it is the Institute of Politics, that they already have a sort of a political leaning. Tell me about Finding Your Way into Public Service.
Yeah, yes. As you know, I fell into, politics and public service, but I tell so often young people or those who are in a career transition, figure out what you're passionate about and what you're good at. I always knew I wanted to help people, and I thought I was going to do that by, going to broadcasting and, tell people stories that I felt weren't heard. But then I got this internship and I saw how government helps people. And I know what I'm good at. I know I'm good at logistics. There's no problem I can't fix, no job too big or too small. And that's how that led me into these roles. So when I'm talking to these incredible University of Chicago students, I really have them think, what issue do they care about? Why do they want to go into this work? Because me and you both know it's not easy and it's not hard. And once they figure out what they're passionate about, I'm like, what are your skill sets, right? Mm-hmm. Are you good at communicating and messaging that you should work in communications? Do you really care about policy and you can figure out ways and policy to make people's lives better? You should work in policy. Do you care about research and reading? Work on the research team. Do you want to just raise money for folks? There's a finance team. So with these students, I really try and help them figure out what their niche is and what they can do. Because as you know, we need young people. We need people to serve. We need people who want to do these jobs to make our country better.
You said that your area of expertise is logistics. What do you mean by that? What would that entail you doing?
Yeah, I don't know how many of your listeners have watched The West Wing, but I used to
actually, I never saw it, so I'm coming from a place of ignorance.
Oh, my goodness. You have to go back and watch it. And I would always say my character was Charlie, who was the aide for President Bartlett on this show, and he was a body man. And so I was the body person for Vice President Harris.
Okay, now what does that mean?
Yeah, so let me tell you. So basically, it's what it sounds, a body person. You are the person who's right next to the candidate, the principal, whoever it is, 24/7. Anytime they're giving a speech, you'll see the aide, right before them. I would go and check the teleprompters and make sure the backup binder's there. If we are traveling and they're about to meet with someone, you're ensuring the candidate or principal, whoever it is, has the materials they need. If people need to reach your principal, your boss, you are the gatekeeper, right? They are reaching out to you for a meeting, for ways to reach out to the boss. And you're kind of this nucleus of a person who's just there at all times, ensuring that your boss is prepared and has everything they need to do their job. And I got my start doing something called advance work, which is like what it sounds. You're one step ahead, planning everything before the candidate or principal gets there. So logistics can mean a lot of things, but it's a great way for folks to get involved on campaigns because you need a lot of people on advance teams. And then when there are administrations, you always have a team of people who are going ahead and planning things and thinking through all the logistics.
Okay, I didn't see West Wing, but I did see Veep. So Tony Hale, was he Julia Louis-Dreyfus's body person? Because he was always when she'd go somewhere and he'd whisper in her ear, yeah, she's the wife of so-and-so, and she's got 4 children, as they're walking up.
Yeah, okay, he definitely was. And it's people will ask me, oh, are you the Tony Hale of it all? I have actually never seen Veep. I tried watching and I was like, oh, it's too close to home.
I heard a lot of political people say just that they didn't want to watch it because it was too realistic.
It truly is. And they've done a fantastic job with it. And it was on one of the state dinners I got to meet Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And it was, we took this photo together just so I could go and tell my friends, like, you guys keep asking me if I'm the Tony Hale. Well, I've got to meet her.
I loved when there was some award she was getting, and Tony Hale went up with her. He was holding her purse. And, she's thanking everybody, and you hear him lean over and say, thank your family, thank your family. And my family, it means so much to me. It was so funny and so amazing. And so that is what your job was. Hey, along those lines, you said you check to make sure like the teleprompter is set up and everything. Twice, Donald Trump has been out and about. I think one time was at the UN, one was someplace else. And we'd always heard that he had his own teleprompter people, but twice the teleprompter stopped functioning. Would that be the responsibility of the venue, or would that be the responsibility of somebody like you who was the body person?
So I will explain. The White House, actually, when you are president, you have all these incredible people that work under you, and different parts of the White House. And this is specifically called WACA, which is the White House Communications Agency. And it is their responsibility to ensure the teleprompters are there. There is, they ensure the podium gets to where they need to be, and the president and vice president have that. So these incredible members of the military are supporting these, those kinds of logistics. And as the body person, I would just ensure, is it the accurate speech that's up there? Is it formatted the way it needs to be? And, most candidates have a backup binder if the, podium, somehow.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to ask you, because I've seen lots of presidents go off and make speeches, and clearly they have a teleprompter, but they don't necessarily, I worked in television for 20 years, and yes, we worked with teleprompters every day, but I always had the script in front of me, and I always knew where we were in the script, because when you least expect it, the teleprompter goes nutty or shuts down altogether. It doesn't seem to me, when I think back to public speeches I've seen, it doesn't seem like there's a script to back you up.
That's so fascinating, because we always had a backup binder which had the speech just in case something happened to the teleprompter.
Would that be on the podium though? So how would they know where it was? And one of the problems was if the teleprompter goes down, not only do you need to have the script, but you need to know where you are in the script, or it doesn't help you.
Yeah, so it's always, and definitely in the Biden-Harris administration, myself and President Biden's body people as well would just go up, ensure we would put their paper version up that's in this binder, and that way, if this teleprompter somehow goes out, the principal can go and just flip a couple of pages and figure out where they are and continue going. All of the people I've been fortunate to work for are great communicators that they can pick up and use that. Well, I will say I have not watched President Trump's speeches because, quite frankly, Joan, it's too much for me, knowing that we could have had incredible women in office. So I try not to. But no, the White House Communication Agency is literally these incredible members of the military. They provide secure voice and data and visual communications to support the president and vice president. And they are amazing. And sometimes prompters go out, but is, responsibility of the staff, the body person, to ensure there is a backup there, right? We have this phrase that I learned from Hillary Land called fail to plan, plan to fail, that you always need to have a plan because things happen.
Yep, they absolutely do. I'm speaking with Opal Vadhan, who is the Pritzker Fellow at the University of Chicago right now. We're going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Hey, I'd like to give out a couple of tickets. You might have heard Patti Vasquez earlier talk about Mean Girls, the Broadway musical that's currently at the Paramount Theater in Aurora. Well, we've got a couple of free tickets. Actually, it starts August 26th, so it hasn't quite hit the stage yet. If you are the second caller, Lady B would love to write down all your information and make sure you get a couple of free tickets. 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. The Paramount Theater is playing the musical Mean Girls from August 26th to October 11th. It is the Broadway play that was based on Tina Fey's film Mean Girls, if you saw that. Again, it's at the Paramount Theater in Aurora. It is funny. It is a musical. It has heart. As you heard Patti say, it's the story of Katie Heron, who moves from Africa to Illinois and discovers the treacherous world of high school and high school girls. The Paramount production of Mean Girls is described as bold, dazzling, and larger than life. If you want to just get a couple of tickets, go to ParamountAurora.com. All of our contests are open to people as long as you're at least 18 years old, live in the greater Chicagoland, Northwest Indiana area, one entry per person, one winner per household, void where prohibited by law. Listeners may only win or qualify to win once every 30 days. All the rules are on our website, WCPT820.com, heartlandsignal.com. Find the contest tab and click on it.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820.
Yeah, I thought there was going to be another recording. I'm used to being introduced over and over and over again, and when there's only one, I just don't know what to do with myself, Lady B. Opal Vadhan is here. She's a Pritzker Fellow at the University of Chicago Institute of Politics. She's worked with Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton. Okay, you have to dish. You've got to tell us, Opal, what are they like on a day-to-day basis? So let's start with Hillary. What you already said that Hillary warned you that sort of like whatever can go wrong will go wrong, so be ready for it. What else was it like to be with Hillary?
You know, it's so funny, and I will say I was, President Clinton was elected in 92. I was born in 93, and I do not remember Hillary Clinton as First Lady. Yes, she was my senator in New York, but as I mentioned earlier, I was not involved in politics, but I knew of Hillary Clinton, but I didn't know her. And when I started working on her campaign, I did something called the RON on the advance team, which is a remain overnight. And you basically are handling the hotel logistics for your principal. And I would see Secretary Clinton come in at 2 a.m., she would be in Iowa and would, go to New Hampshire and all these, early states and travel around the country. And no matter how late it was or early in the morning it was, she was so incredibly kind. And not just to me, this 22-year-old advanced staffer, I was so young, but to every single person she encountered with. And it's so funny. I would tell my friends I'm working on this campaign and they'd be like, oh, we hear Hillary Clinton is so mean and she's so tough. How could you work for her? And I would be like, you all know me. I would never work for someone who is mean. Secretary Clinton's nothing but kind and has a big heart, and she is so funny. When I tell you her humor, she's just so funny. And so as we talk about women in leadership, there are so many misconceptions about them that I wish the world knew Secretary Clinton like I do. And even now, we're still close, and she was so supportive when I took the job with VP Harris, and she still checks in on me, so I feel very lucky to have learned, from her, worked with her, and feel grateful to have her in my corner.
A lot of times I've seen this, that women in public office, there have been a number of times with people who are in the Senate or in the Congress where word has come out, oh, she's really difficult, and she yells at her staffers, and I wonder if indeed there are women who are more difficult than the men in those jobs. But, a man takes his staff to task, and he is simply demanding because he wants the best. I mean, a woman does it, and she's just being mean. There really does seem to be a huge double standard there.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't ever remember hearing about men who are too mean, right?
Yeah.
It's constantly about women, and women in all fields, right? It's just so easy to do so.
And I do remember when Bill Clinton was running for office, and, Hillary was a very accomplished lawyer. And there was, as he was campaigning, there was kind of blowback. She doesn't smile enough. She's not nice enough. She's not nurturing enough, because she was talking about what was going on in the world. And it ended up, I kid you not, she had to start baking cookies. And the PR had to focus on Hillary baking cookies because people felt that she was too tough. She was, too unnurturing to be the first lady. I will never forget that.
Isn't that insane? Because you would never say this about a man. And no, only many years later, as I grew up, it was a quote of the outlaw of, I suppose I could have stayed home and baked cookies and had teas, but what I decided to do was fulfill my profession, which I entered before my husband was in public life. Nowadays, I would be cheering that on, and look at this woman who has ambition and who's going to have a career. Mm-hmm. But back then she was just, I would say she was above the time. She was a trailblazer even then. And it's fascinating because I had no idea about any of this. She came out with a documentary when I was working for her, Hillary, on Hulu. And even though I was working for her, I watched it and I was like, I had no idea she was burned in effigy. There are things you just don't realize what these women trailblazers have gone through in our lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about what Kamala Harris was like when she was away from the microphones and away from the cameras.
Yeah, Vice President Harris and we spent so much time together. I always said I spent more time with her in those 4 years than anyone else in my life. And once again, I go back to these women I worked for. She, there's also this reputation that she's a prosecutor, she's too tough. But working for her, once again, so incredibly kind and brilliant. And she would do whatever it takes to solve the issue, right? And for me, she made me a better person. She made me a better worker. And I was inspired by her every single day. And once again, her being the first Black and South Asian woman vice president, the pressure on her shoulders and what that meant for women and girls everywhere, to see her handle that with grace and courage, I keep saying I feel so grateful and lucky that I've had the honor and privilege to work with these women. And yes, everyone has seen them in such a light, but no, they would ask about my family and my life. And no matter how long the days were, we'd be on Marine 2 together and, we'd get off and she'd always say, thank you so much, Opal. Thank you, Opal. And it's something small as that of, I know we're exhausted, she's campaigning or we're doing all these trips and she has so much going on, but constantly gracious. And I say, how lucky are we in our lifetimes to have such incredible role models who have willing to continue to break the glass ceiling.
When did you go to work for Kamala?
I started, my first day was March 1st, 2021. It was the first day of Women's History Month. And I had left Secretary Clinton. I put my out of office on February 28th, 2021. So it was a quick turnaround for sure.
Opal, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh yeah. I thought, I'm sorry. I thought I didn't realize that you had stopped. I thought you were in the middle of a sentence. No. Were you part of her retinue when she was running running for president?
No. So I started on the 2016 with Secretary Clinton. Loved Secretary Clinton so much that I wanted to stay on and be part of her next chapter, and right place, right time, a lot of luck allowed me to stay with Secretary Clinton and become her executive assistant and trip director, and got to collaborate on this book that her and her daughter Chelsea did, the Book of Gutsy Women. And so I stayed with Secretary Clinton for 5 years. I only left to join Vice President Harris's team at the White House. So I didn't do any of the 2020 campaign cycle. And we had only met each other through Zoom interviews because it was COVID during that time.
Were you there when Biden had the terrible debate and Kamala Harris moved up to the top of the ticket?
Oh, I was. I will never forget that day. I remember, we were there for the debate. We were in LA, and VP Harris, ended up doing some interviews after that debate. And then when President Biden dropped out, it was one of our days that we weren't on the road. I was so happy to not be traveling. And I just get a call saying, it was public at the time, and I get a call saying, get to the VP's residence. And I did. And, there was my boss on the phone calling everyone she knew. I think she made over 100 calls. And it was showtime in a sense that now she is responsible of trying to beat Donald Trump.
Wow.
And we only had 107 days.
Yeah, really. It was a lightning round kind of campaign. Opal, thanks so much for joining us. Your students at the University of Chicago are very lucky to have someone with your insight and experience instructing them. Thanks so much for sharing your story with us.
Thanks so much, Joan, and thank you to your listeners. And I love seeing women continuing to lead and all that you do. So I so appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you as well. Opal Vadhan is the Pritzker Fellow at the University of Chicago Institute of Politics. We are going to take a break. We're going to take a break for news. And when we come back, we are going to talk to Professor John Murphy, who's a professor of communications. And we have a lot of questions for him on who is doing a good job of communicating in politics these days. We'll be right back after the news.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
With us is Dr. John Murphy, professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Joan?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. Hillary sent me a note, and she said that you told her that Trump sneaking off the plane in Turkey in a food container has some historical precedence. I'm sorry, if we had any other food container presidents before this one?
We have not had food container presidents, but we have had presidents who have been caught out sneaking around. The stories have come out later that for security reasons, they had to enter somewhere else or find another way. Perhaps the most famous one was Abraham Lincoln, who on the occasion of his first inaugural, a mob had taken over Baltimore, Maryland. They weren't sure how to get Lincoln into Washington, D.C. for his inaugural address. And so they ended up smuggling him in late at night on a train with a shawl dressed over, which meant all of his political opponents immediately accused him of dressing like a woman and sneaking into Washington, D.C., of not having the courage to face the rebellion. And so there have been moments like that throughout our history in which presidents, for security reasons, have had to do things like that.
Okay. All right. So Abraham Lincoln, was he actually wearing a dress or just a shawl?
No, he was just wearing a shawl. And the same was true at the end of the war, ironically enough. Confederate President Jefferson Davis was captured while wearing a shawl. And again, everybody said, oh, he was, dressed in women's clothes. It was their way of attacking him at the end of the war. Well, of course, not one of them had decoys out that, trying to get the enemy to go after the decoy, which was the particularly cowardly thing that President Trump did. In fact, I don't recall an occasion where a president used a decoy like that. Although in fiction, you often see doppelgangers for presidents or British prime ministers or something like that.
Pete Souza, who, as we all now know, was the photographer during the Obama presidential years, he posted that there was one time where President Obama had to, sneak somewhere or go somewhere without really announcing it. And because the tradition has always been that there will be journalists covering the president basically 24/7 for as long as the president is in office. And Pete Souza said that they picked a member of the press, swore them to secrecy, and that member of the press went with Obama, however, whatever means was being used to secretly get him from point A to point B. Not only did Donald Trump not do that, he left the members of the press on the plane that, whether or not it was true, he believed might be shot out of the sky. Ooh, that's not good.
That's not good. And it's important to have the press along. I mean, they talk about them as the pool reporters, especially since President Kennedy's assassination. It has become required, in essence, that presidents have reporters with them so that if an event happens, the people of a democracy know what happened. And that's why that rule is in place, because we have a right to that transparency. It's our government, and we need to know what our presidents do. So when Joe Biden took a 9-hour train trip to go to Kyiv, when Bill Clinton went to Pakistan briefly, each presented enormous security concerns, but each also included at least one representative of the press so we would know what happened. And it actually tends to work for the president, too, when they're not hiding in beverage carts. There were nice pictures of Biden on the train, which echoed all Biden's love for trains in his daily commute from Delaware.
Yeah.
And so it worked out pretty well for him. But I don't think hiding in the beverages cart probably would have worked out very well for Donald Trump.
And, I don't know if there was a Secret Service agent in the catering container, but it was reported that he took Natalie Harp, who is with him pretty much 24/7, Walt Nuda, who he is very close to, and Dan Schiavone. There was no report of, oh, by the way, there was also a Secret Service presence. And I thought that those were, since apparently Stephen Miller was on the plane, you'd think somebody who was really a high-ranking aide would have been in the container cart with him, not just three people who were more lower-ranking people, but people who he apparently likes the best.
Well, Walt Nuda took an indictment for him. So,
yes.
That's a guy he's going to have with him all the time. If you need someone to throw yourself between, Donald Trump and an indictment, Walt Nuda's your guy.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Usually there's somebody from the White House press corps on a trip like that. I don't know who the representative was, but there are some people who are speculating that the reason Caroline Leavitt has suddenly announced her resignation is because she might have been one of the people he left on the plane.
Yeah. It's just, as usual with the Trump administration, they take something that could have been a plus, that you could have said, despite the danger, we are going forward with this. We defy the Iranians to do their worst. I am not going to do this kind of thing. You can imagine a President John McCain, laughing at them and offering to pilot the plane himself if things went wrong. And so you can imagine those, and that would have been a big plus, even if it's announced afterward, like Biden's trip to Ukraine. Instead, they've turned it into the stuff of humor. We're all laughing about it. Cartoons are coming out of him peering out from underneath a cart or within those. a basic minimal level of communication professionalism could have turned this into a positive. And it's a negative. And it's partly, I think, just because they want to hide everything. And once you hide stuff, you can't do anything productive with it.
Yeah. And as I think that as long as the Trump administration continues on, there will be more and more leakers, people, because I think in his first round as president, his administration was leaking like a sieve. But this time around, things started off much more close to the vest. I mean, he surrounded himself with the sycophants and the toadies who adore him and were so much less likely to leak anything. But I think, this is my take, and as a communications expert, I'd like you to weigh in. I think his presidency has gone so poorly with the war in Iran and the uncontrollable higher prices for nearly everything back at home, the cruelty, ICE killing people. I think that maybe some of those people who started off loyal are becoming disillusioned, because it seems like we are getting, as time goes on, more and more stories of what's going on in the inner circle. What do you think about that?
I think that's true. And as presidential historians often note, when presidents enter bad times, particularly their second term, their world tends to collapse. That is, they trust fewer and fewer people. And so Richard Nixon, as he moved through the end of his first term and into his second term, only was interacting with 3 or 4 people. Cabinet officials had a hard time talking to him. He simply did not want to communicate with anybody other than H.R. Haldeman or John Ehrlichman or Henry Kissinger. And the same thing seems to be starting to happen from reports with Donald Trump. He will have a big public occasion with cabinet officials, but when it comes to everyday interaction, his world seems to be getting smaller, at least because he's all kind of guy who wants to hear bad news. And virtually everybody's going to bring him bad news. And so if you want to hold out bad news, you just have to see fewer and fewer people, because anybody outside of that circle has got terrible things to tell you.
Ugh. Yeah. We need to take a break. I'm talking to Dr. John Murphy, professor of communications, particularly political communications. We will be back with more after this.
Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
Joining me is Dr. John Murphy, professor in the Department of Communications at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I want to ask you, John, I want to talk about, let's be specific. Let's look at Francesca Hong. She became very popular in Wisconsin after Sarah Rodriguez dropped out from the race. And when it looked like she was definitely going to run away with this Democratic primary, the last 2 weeks, according to pretty much everybody I've spoken to, the last 2 weeks were really, really rough for her. Unlike Abdul El Sayed in Michigan, she didn't seem to be able to counter the narrative of some of the more radical things that she had posted on social media earlier. You know, whatever you think of him, Graham Plattner kind of, at least until he was charged with rape, he kind of said, you know, he explained away his past. Abdul El Sayed seems to not at all be bothered by people who are going after him because he's considered a progressive or a socialist or Islamic. But Francesca Hong did not seem to do a good job in the last 2 weeks of trying to get her narrative out. Do you agree with me? And what went wrong?
I think she did have a difficult time in the last couple of weeks of the election, and I think a couple of things went wrong. First, I think the alternative candidate ended up getting the endorsement of Tony Evers, the very popular former governor of Wisconsin. And part of what's true in primaries, even more so in general elections, is that people are looking for a brand or something to help them figure out who this person is. Because most of the time they don't know. Primaries can be filled with 4 or 5 or 6 candidates. They're all in one party, so you don't have sort of the one party designation. You can go, oh, this guy's a Democrat, I'm voting for him. You don't have that immediate shortcut. And so in a primary, when you don't have that, endorsements become more important, particularly if the endorser is the very popular outgoing governor who likely could have won re-election had he chosen to do so. So you put all that together and start to see why she had a difficult time hanging on to that. I think she also suffered by comparison to Peggy Flanagan in Minnesota and to El Sayed in Michigan, because they are both, very articulate. They handled the problems that were thrown at them, stuck to their message. They seemed more clear about what they were going to do and who they were. And I think ultimately people had a difficult time figuring out who she actually was.
I don't remember the date, but somebody reposted the one thing that she'd really been given a lot of grief for, which was her post about Thanksgiving. And I do believe it was from a while ago, but she was referring to, not untruthfully, the fact that, Thanksgiving is seen by many as celebrating colonialism and the oppression of the indigenous Americans. And, Thanksgiving does have a lot more, like Columbus Day, suddenly we are more aware of the reality of our history. But it was like she couldn't, who was it? Oh, I know, that MAGA guy, Scott Jennings, I think his name is, on CNN. And he was like, oh, gosh, I sure hope I can have my yams this coming Thanksgiving. I mean, she really, really was hit hard with that. And if you were advising her, what would you have told her to say about that? Because she did try to walk away from it or explain it, but not in a way that was successful.
Yeah, I think what you need to do in circumstances like that is weave humor into what you are doing to diminish the attack on you by laughing at it, by saying, something along the lines of, well, I'm sorry Scott Jennings is concerned about his yams. Most people in Wisconsin can't afford to buy a full Thanksgiving dinner this year because of his policies, because of Donald Trump's policies. At one point, or something like, come on, we all know Thanksgiving, has this history to it. I love Thanksgiving. I love eating turkey. I love playing touch football on the lawn with my friends and doing that kind of thing. I'm also aware that it creates real problems. And are we honestly talking about Thanksgiving when the price of gas is over $4 a gallon and diesel's over $5? This is what Republicans are concerned about. They're doing this whole playbook over and over and over. Distract, divide, diminish. And that's what we've got to fight against. It's that sort of thing I think you can do. El Sayed has proven very good at doing to try to get those kinds of changes.
I played a commercial that I had heard a lot about that Abdul El Sayed put out there, where his grandparents are talking about him, and his grandmother starts off with this dark voice, "Who is Abdul El Sayed?" Well, he's our grandson, and she and her husband are sitting there. She
tries to sound like one of those film out of horror movies, in the dark of night.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
And they talk about him and how they helped raise him and all, how he buys them groceries every week. And then he pops up from behind the couch and he's like, too much. I'm Abdul El Sayed, and I really, really approve this message. And it is fun. And it is a good message, and it is like, don't be afraid of me because my skin is dark and my name is Muslim. But I also think that part of what that ad was supposed to do to make him less scary, his grandparents are clearly white. They are not dark-skinned. They, they appear to be as white as snow. And I think there was a subtext there, John. You don't have to be afraid of me because I have a scary name. You know, what do you think about that?
Barack Hussein Obama.
There you go.
Consistently referred to his grandparents from Kansas, and that his grandfather served in Patton's army, fought in World War II, came home, started a family. Yeah, those kinds of stories and those kind of narratives, pretty traditional for, you know, candidates who were not who were not in the mainstream. And they try to develop story narratives. And yeah, we are just like you. We go through those things you go through. We suffer those things you suffer. And they have continually done so. And I think it's a good strategy. And he also, you know, flips it and goes on the attack. So he talks about his opponent, Mike Rogers, who makes fun of you know, the Muslim name. He says, but I really like Mike's name because every time Donald Trump says, do this, he says, Roger. And he's got a whole bit built off of that. When he wants cuts in healthcare, I say, Roger, sir. When he wants his slicked, I say, Roger. And the crowd is roaring with him. So it's that kind of political skill and turnaround you need to have. And I don't think we saw that in Wisconsin.
How important was it when David Crowley won the Democratic nomination to run for governor in Wisconsin that seemingly within seconds he said that Francesca Hong was going to campaign with him, that they were going to be doing a unity tour. It was going to start right away. Because, you know, I remember back when, you know, Hillary and Bernie were in the race to get the Democratic presidential nod. And obviously it went to Hillary. And Bernie said, you know, this is it. I'm all in on Hillary. But there was a feeling that he didn't really do enough to get his supporters on board with Hillary. So is this the kind of thing that will do that? The fact that Francesca was there, like seemingly within seconds of his declaration of winning the campaign, to say she was going to be campaigning right beside him?
I think it does. And in the three high-profile recent races in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, you had the opponents showing up at the rallies. You had announcements of tours. You had endorsements. You had Haley Stevens, I think her name is, going on CNN to talk about, yes, I am absolutely all for him. I will be campaigning for him. Angie Craig did the same thing in Minnesota. It is a lesson they learned, I think, from 2016. And Democrats are not going to get caught out like that again. And so they have been very determined that whether the progressive wins, whether the more moderate candidate wins, they're going to be out there. They are going to be campaigning. The differences between Democrats are far less than the differences between Democrats and Republicans. They're going to make that clear.
Yeah. And I think that the Republicans have to be careful. You know, Donald Trump has decided that he can scare people by saying that anybody who labels themselves a democratic socialist, that they're a communist. They're a communist. I think that kind of over-the-top rhetoric might just backfire on him. What do you think?
I am particularly disturbed by the Muslim arguments. The communists, sure. But the Islamophobia has become just absolutely blatant. Nancy Mace saying any Muslim who holds public office is a threat to the national security of the United States.
Nancy Mace, whose own political career seems to be at an end.
Yeah, it's over. And Donald Trump saying jihadists are getting elected everywhere in the country. Tommy Tuberville saying that Muslims are traitors and that sort of thing. That stuff is just, I think that in particular, when you start attacking somebody's religion like that, that really puts people off. That it just reeks of desperation that you've got nothing better to do than to do that. I think there are some real problems with that. The exaggeration with communists is just so absurd. I don't know whether it's going to really stick very much with people. But the Islamophobia makes you look terrible. And I think there's a real possibility of a boomerang with that.
So you think that rather than being effective and scaring people, that might incense people?
Yes. I mean, there's considerable evidence, for instance, that it is the Arab American population in Dearborn and around Detroit and in Detroit that helped to flip the state red in 2024. And boy, the campaign they're running means it's going to be, 100% of that vote is going to go Democratic this time around. People have learned their lesson. And I think that's a pretty powerful thing to have going on in that Senate race. I mean, that matters. That's a margin for error they don't have.
I'm talking to Dr. John Murphy. He's a professor of communications, an expert in presidential rhetoric at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. We are going to take a break and be back with more after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Oh, Lady B was taking one of those short naps that keep me fresh. It's Joan Esposito, and I want to tell you about 120 Life. Clearly, I could use a fruit drink right about now. 120 Life is a drink. It's made with ingredients that, in addition to being tasty, help support healthy blood pressure. My mom had high blood pressure, was on medicine her whole adult life, and for a lot of us, it runs in the family. So if you are interested in finding a natural way to try to bring your blood pressure down, try 120 Life, a great tasting fruit and vegetable drink. Put it to the test for a couple of weeks. Check your blood pressure. See if it works for you. Some people reported results in as little as 2 weeks. And as I said, it's a great fruit drink that isn't overly sugary. To try it, go online to 120life.com. That's 120life.com. If your high blood pressure doesn't come down in 2 weeks, you can get a full refund. And you can get 20% off your order. Yay! Use the code JOAN when you check out, JOAN. You get 20% off that order. These statements have not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joining me is Dr. John Murphy, professor of communications at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and an expert in presidential rhetoric. Presidential rhetoric, does it still count as effective communication if you sound like you have a mouthful of spit, if you're saying things that don't make any sense, if you can't manage a cohesive, coherent thought? And my favorite, when there's a big meeting in the White House and you fall asleep, what kind of presidential communication is that, John?
Not good.
Not good, okay?
I got to say, Donald Trump gaining the presidency, especially the second time, created a kind of crisis in my field, in my discipline. I mean, is what we study worthless? This guy meets none of the normal norms of communication, of rhetoric. He doesn't deliver speeches the way that we expect them to be delivered. He doesn't follow the norms. So it's the whole world changing on us. And part of what his second term has started to show us, particularly with the war in Iraq, is that you pay a price for ignoring the rules. He never gave the kind of speech all presidents give when they take the country to war. He didn't go on national television. He didn't say, here are the reasons why. He didn't talk about who the enemy is and why they are a threat to us. He didn't indicate what winning would look like and how we were going to do it. He didn't rally the country. He had a weird little video that he threw up late the night of the first strikes, and that was it. And then he tweets about it. And that's all he does. And as a result, this has been the most unpopular war in U.S. history. Without any competition, from day one, 60% of people opposed this war. There was no rally around the flag effect. And I think historians are going to look back and say this war was his Hurricane Katrina.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, in both cases, you have presidents who were at least, semi-popular at the beginnings of their second terms. And then in Bush's case, a disaster struck. And in Trump's case, he chose the disaster. And they proved themselves to be utterly ineffectual. And cost the rest of America a good deal along the way. And that's when their popularity really started to drop. And I don't think it will ever recover, at least partly because the Iranians are not going to give him a chance to declare victory. They're working day by day to weaken him. And so you've got a serious problem that the president utterly failed to address. And that kind of flaw in judgment is not something people readily forgive. And especially because, again, he built no support at the beginning of this process. And so just like Bush with Katrina, at that point, people just threw up their hands and said, this, Brownie is not going to solve this problem. New Orleans is not going to be saved. And we're saying that this guy, Hegseth, can't run a war, and Trump's not doing anything about it.
It's one thing not to communicate with the American people when you're going to take a military action like this. But from all accounts, other than Israel, he didn't consult with any of the senators or Congress people, any people on the Armed Forces Committee, the Intelligence Committee, and he didn't even consult with our supposed allies in the Middle East who were going to be directly impacted by this, let alone anybody else in the world. That's, to me, quite unusual. I mean, have other presidents acted alone on something so important?
I'm sure there are examples. I always get nervous when I say no, because somebody will then say, well, there was this president. And I go, oh, yeah, dang it. But it's exceptionally rare. Let me put it that way. It's hard to remember when another president acted in that kind of way, who did not inform anybody. I mean, at least on issues of war and peace. So, for instance, Richard Nixon kept it very, very close to his vest that he was going to normalize relations with what was then referred to as Red China. And in fact, it's one of the instances of a cabinet official sneaking into a country. Henry Kissinger was supposed to be in Pakistan. Instead, he was in China, setting up the trip for Richard Nixon, and he launched it as a surprise and said, look, we are going to create a whole new relationship with communist China. But that's, peacemaking. That's not war making. Mm-hmm. When presidents have used military force, they at least, at minimum, call in the congressional leadership. When John Kennedy faced the Cuban Missile Crisis, he consulted initially with members of his cabinet and kept it very quiet because, of course, you had to at that point. The Russians didn't know. We knew they had put missiles in Cuba. And then when he had determined on a course of action, he brought in the congressional leadership before he announced it to the country, and he informed Great Britain and a few others of our allies, but certainly Great Britain. And so before he announced the quarantine of Cuba, he lined up allied support, congressional support, and cabinet support. And none of that apparently happened here.
Yeah. One of our listeners just texted in, they enjoy our conversation. Thank you very much. John and I are very pleased about that. But they're saying Trump is likely communicating with only a few people as his presidency falls apart. Maybe Stephen Miller, Todd Blanche, Pete Hegseth. You don't see Marco Rubio much anymore. Vance is nowhere to be seen. Besant, Vogt seem to have no clue what's going on. Do you think that's what's happening? He's now limited his communication to a very, very small inner circle, and that doesn't seem like a real effective way to be president.
No, it's not. And as I mentioned earlier, when presidents get into trouble, they have a certain tendency to do that. In fact, we also seemingly know from press reports that Hegseth wasn't telling Trump the truth about our munition shortage. And then when Trump finally called him out about it, Hegseth in turn threw the Assistant Secretary of Defense under the bus. So they aren't even telling the truth to each other when they do talk to each other, which is certainly not a way to run an administration. And so all of that starts to pile up. And, you know, the long difficulty, the absolute clear difficulty for every authoritarian is that at a certain point, people are afraid to tell that person the truth. And so they don't. And then the authoritarian becomes increasingly out of touch with reality. And at a certain point, it simply overwhelms that leader. They can't get good information to make good decisions. And so they make bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. You know, like that famous bunker scene that gets repurposed for everything from the movie about Hitler, where they are constantly repurposed scene for everything.
Yeah. I believe that Donald Trump didn't consult with any allies or didn't even give them a heads up what he was going to do, because I think Donald Trump thinks, well, I'm the most powerful person in the world. I don't need, they can find out after I do this. I don't need their advice. I don't need their input. And, you know, the more people I tell, maybe the more likely it is to get out. I think it is entirely ego-driven. And I think when he discovered the rest of the world was really ticked off because they didn't get any kind of a heads up, I think he was genuinely surprised by that.
Oh, I think he was. And Donald Trump is an unusual president, to say the least, in a lot of ways. But in this, he is absolutely, you know, with an extreme version of it, but absolutely acting out the script of a lot of second-term presidents who win re-election or win election, in his case, for a second time, and think then that they just have the magic super secret sauce and that can do no wrong, that they're geniuses. Yeah. And George W. Bush thought he could privatize Social Security and appoint a dog show owner to be head of FEMA. And Richard Nixon, of course, did all the things that Richard Nixon did. And even good presidents, like Franklin Roosevelt, decide they're going to pack the Supreme Court at a time when that was just a totally unpopular thing to do. So it's one after the other where you go, they get this disease of arrogance that they know better than other people do because they have won election twice. And they're the best. And Donald Trump is he clearly felt like his first term, he wasn't allowed to be himself, that he appointed all these people other Republicans told him to appoint that would ride herd on him, like H.R. McMaster, Kelly, or these other people who would, you know, make sure he didn't do anything too wrong. And this term, he decided he's going to be himself and he's going to do it all because he's Donald Trump. Well, that's where it's got us.
Yeah, indeed. Dr. John Murphy and I are going to take a break. We will return with more after this.
Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Hey, are you interested in buying a home or refinancing the one you've got? Call Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender, now with almost 800 five-star Google reviews. Here's one from Mary. David is fantastic. He's always ready to help, whether buying, selling, refinancing, or helping with finances. He's patient, even with complicated issues, and goes the extra mile when others wouldn't. I can't recommend him enough. You won't regret calling David for any of your mortgage issues. I'm recommending him to my daughter and anyone who needs a mortgage. Well, Mary called for help, asking David if she could consolidate her debt. He helped her, and she was so thankful, she posted that five-star review. If you want that same outstanding service Mary got, call Team Hochberg now, 855-563-2843, or go online, 56david.com. Team Hochberg has helped me and thousands of our listeners, but they can't help if you don't make that call, 855-563-2843, or visit the website 56david.com. ACM Equal Housing Lender, NMLS 643-114.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joining me is Dr. John Murphy, professor of communications, particularly presidential/political rhetoric. John, I want to ask you, we've been talking about, like with the progressives, what is the most kind of convincing communication? I've seen in my own professional life people who say the right thing, say the thing that would make them sound like a really great leader, really wonderful person, but then behave in a way that is completely different. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if we didn't get that today from Todd Blanche, who is, by all accounts, still Donald Trump's personal lawyer, will do literally anything Donald Trump wants him to do. And yet today he made a speech to the DOJ talking about his administration of the DOJ was going to be marked by integrity. He was going to show integrity in this role. So I'm thinking to myself, he's saying that because he thinks that's what everybody wants to hear. That is what he should be saying. But I don't believe for a minute he plans to do that. Do you convince anybody? Do you earn any brownie points if you say what you know you should say, even though you know you're going to behave in a way that's completely different?
Oh, yeah, it's a terrible thing to do. I mean, there are types of cases like that. One is the person who says they are this kind of person, but in their private life, they're clearly not. They do terrible things. And so they say they're all for the rights of women, and yet then we find out they assault women and have assaulted women. And, that's just grotesque. The other kind of case that's even more immediately obvious is somebody claiming they're a person of integrity when in their public life they have never acted with any kind of integrity. And that's immediately obvious to everybody. At least with somebody like Graham Plattner, you had to do some research. Mm-hmm. With Todd Blanche, he has failed to obey the law. The Epstein Act said he was supposed to release all of these documents, that he was supposed to show how involved everybody, including the president, was in this, and he's failed to do so. He's failed to obey the law. And so we know who this guy is. He has showed that to us in his public life. And so assertions of integrity right now ring very hollow, even among conservatives, because it's a lot of conservatives who have, to their credit, who have not given up on the Epstein case.
When somebody in a position of power, particularly a president, lies to you bold-faced on national television, as many believe Donald Trump is getting ready to do when Democrats look like they're going to sweep the midterms, he's going to come out and say there was interference. We have proof that Venezuela or whomever has interfered with voting machines, and I am declaring this election null and void, and I'm asking the FBI to go around to every place, every Secretary of State, every Secretary of every state office, and pull all of the voting materials. If we get a lie like that, what is the best way to counter it?
That's so unprecedented in American history. It's hard to say what the best way to counter it is. I mean, I think at that point, people simply have to say, no, we're not going to do that. And what's really the key to that, I think, will be to have Republicans say that. I don't know if we can trust enough of them to do that. But it was Republican senators who brought down Richard Nixon, went to the White House and said, we're not going to support you anymore. Barry Goldwater, Hugh Scott, they're the ones who said, look, we've listened to the tapes. You lied to us. You have out and out lied to us when you said you had nothing to do with this. We are not going to support you anymore. And so I think it's going to take Republicans feeling as if now he is coming after them. Now he is lying to them. in ways profoundly different than before. Plus, if it is a Democratic sweep, that should embolden Republicans to say he's lost his mojo. We don't need to be afraid of him anymore because he's now a lame duck and he's lost his mojo, and we don't have to do this anymore.
But, in Nixon's time, we had Barry Goldwater, who went to Nixon and was like, dude, it's over. When it came time to try to save the Affordable Care Act, John McCain split with the rest of the Republicans in defiance of Trump and voted to save it. But I'm looking around at the Republicans in the Senate and the House. I don't see a John McCain. I don't see an Adam Kinzinger. Is there anybody that has given... Bill Cassidy, for God's sake, Trump destroyed him. He's old. He's rich. He doesn't need anything from anybody anymore. And he's still folded and was the vote that gave us Todd Blanche, even though he's got to know what a bad guy Blanche is. Who is the John McCain of today?
And what's so crazy about Cassidy is that he still goes on and condemns RFK Jr., Cassidy saying, I'm a doctor and I know RFK. Well, you put him there, buddy. You're the one who put him in office. So don't say that he's the guy. There has seldom been an example of American history. I can only think of the people who were called the faces before the Civil War, Northerners who supported slavery, who lacked the backbone that Cassidy lacks. There is something deeply wrong with that guy. Yes, I don't look around and I see a lot. And it's hard to see who it might be. But, as people often say with authoritarians, it seems utterly impossible that somebody will turn on them until they do, and then the whole thing just goes downhill.
Well, yeah, that's it. It's like a house of cards. And once it goes, it's going to go big. But
once it goes.
It seems like there have been so many people who had the opportunity to be the one who pulled that card out of the bottom. And yet nobody, time after time after time, Republicans who it seems to me literally have nothing to lose refuse to do it. The only one who Trump has screwed over, who's willing to stand up to him, that I see is Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie, who's even young enough that you would think he would want to try to suck up to the Republicans, maybe get a cushy lobbying job or something. And he is not doing it. He is not having it. When he made his concession speech after Trump ran a primary challenger against him who defeated him, he said, Donald Trump knows that, he's gotten me out of office, but he needs to remember that I'm going to be in the House of Representatives for 7 more months. Good for him. Where are the rest of them?
Yeah, I know. Lynn Cheney did it in the first term. And it's a pretty short roll call. There are just not a lot of them out there doing that. But I think I have to say, there's starting to be cracks showing. The South Carolina Republican primary does not seem as if President Trump's endorsement is necessarily going to put Lindsey Graham's sister over the top. And she is now in a runoff, and South Carolinians are not sure she would be a particularly effective senator. And so there seem growing doubts. His choice in Minnesota went down. Mike Lindell was not accepted by the Republican Party in Minnesota.
Though I'm not sure even today he's conceded yet.
I know. He says there are irregularities in the vote. And you want to go, boy, if anybody deserves that, it's the Republican Party. Good heavens. It's kind of nice to know, on a happier note, that all 4 candidates for the major seats in Minnesota are women. Minnesota will have
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, Minnesota will have its first woman governor, no matter who wins, and then we'll have another woman senator, no matter who wins that race. So that's nice to see. It's important to see, I think. Yeah,
there's a newscaster in Minnesota I follow, and she did a post yesterday, and she's like, I've been in this state for a long time and covered a lot of races. I'm going to be covering these races. And she looked at the camera, but we've got 2 top races, and both contestants are women. We have 4 women. So regardless of which side wins, we're going to have women in these roles. And she was just, her jaw was on the floor, which I thought was great.
And the Minnesota Republican Party right now, I do not think they'll win this race. I think the odds are against them. But for the first time in a long time, they're actually trying. Michelle Tafoya has raised money. She is pro-choice. She is willing to allow abortions up to 12 weeks. Lisa DeMuth, the head of the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House, is a mainstream conservative. Certainly, they're both Trumpy, but they are not Mike Lindell. They are not, that
Mehmet
kind
Oz.
of person. And neither one won the endorsement of Donald Trump. And so Minnesota Republicans are sort of saying it's possible to sort of run a party without necessarily kowtowing to him at every step along the way, which is good to see.
Dr. John Murphy, thank you for being here. University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. It is always a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you again.
Pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
That's going to do it for me today. Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez is next. One of the people she's going to talk to is a contributor to Midas Touch. The Midas Touch contributors are always people who are very, very entertaining. Tomorrow at 6, Richard Chu kicks off Chu's Views. One of the people he's going to be talking to is Melanie Nathan, a South African-born human rights lawyer who directs the African Human Rights Coalition. I will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Please join me then. We are going to have a wonderful day, and I would like you to be here for it. Have a great evening, my friends, and good night.